There we go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fierce and Flowing podcast. If you're new, I open my heart to you. Thank you for being here. If you join me weekly, thank you for coming back. As I always start, I'm always excited with who my guest is, and I just feel so blessed and lucky that I have so many incredible people in my life, and my guest today is one of those. So I want to introduce you to Frances Hondal. I'm going to read her short bio and then tell you how we know each other, which we've known each other for quite some time. So Frances is a seasoned global executive with over 30 years of experience in consumer marketing, technology, finance, and international general management. She's held executive roles at American Express and MasterCard, leading business strategy, managing P&Ls, launching B2C and B2B products and services, and developing strategic partnerships across banking, retail, and travel sectors. She serves on the boards of Bath and Body Works and Equitable Holdings, and she is a trustee of our combined alma mater, Florida International University Board of Trustees. Frances is a first-generation Cuban American and has been recognized as a top Hispanic executive in business across various organizations. She earned her bachelor's degree in finance and international business and her MBA from FIU and lives in Miami, just like I do with her family. So, Frances, welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Moni.
It
Really
amazes me
appreciate
that you can create such a powerful short bio with everything that you have done. I know how challenging that is for people, and I love it. I just love how you encapsulated it into, you know, three short paragraphs. And we'll
that
talk
good.
a little bit more in depth about everything that you have done and the impact that you make. And certainly that has been part of my trajectory and our friendship is watching the different evolutions of your career and of you, as a leader, as a woman, as a mother. And we'll talk about all of those roles, right? Because a lot of the individuals that tune in to this podcast, I would say 90% are women, in their mid 40s and above, and a lot of younger ones too, who are high achievers, who um, love transforming themselves and reiterating themselves and their lives and giving themselves permission to do that. And I'm sure, as you know, and as I know as well, sometimes the reiteration is not as seamless, right? It's not as easy to figure out like what's next. And I can't wait to dive into that with you. Um, so again, welcome. And for those of you listening, Frances and I go back to, I would say probably 15
At
years
least, at
at
least.
least,
Mhm.
um, to Florida International University, where um, I was with FIU for 17 years. And, my role was as the alumni director for the business school, but also building our boards, our external boards, doing fundraising and a lot of these, public relations activities. And Frances was one of our alums who I immediately was able to pull in so she could share her wisdom and serve as the chair of our alumni circle. And then from there, it just, continued to escalate
Thank you.
your many roles with the university. But of course, we've stayed friends and tracked each other along our changes and our evolutions. So Frances, the first question that I ask my guests is to go back to a time in their life, or it could be a series of times,
Mhm.
that create a theme in your life where you feel that you had to be fierce for yourself, right? And fierceness for me is not that we're aggressive or that we're angry or are out to get people. It's more about, when do I need to step into my power? When do I need to do
Yeah.
something that is hard or challenging and something that I've avoided doing because I'm afraid of what the outcome is, or
Mhm.
sometimes it's I cannot not do it any longer. It's time, right?
Yeah.
So share with us
Yeah.
what that is for you.
Yeah. First of all, thanks again. Thanks again to have me here. I'm seriously just really, really happy to be part of your adventure, and your reinvention and all the goodness that you're putting out in the world. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
that. So, when you ask me that question, it's funny. I think of there are different moments, I think, throughout, life, career, it's one and the same as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Um, where I had to, what I would say when I thought of, when you asked me fears, I immediately thought, where did I have to make a decision that probably felt super uncomfortable, that felt that I wasn't ready, I didn't have the experience, or I didn't really I may not have felt that I was at the right level, all
Right.
those crazy doubts that come into your mind.
Yes.
So, I've had a couple of those, and I'll share, I think, two of them, because they're at different parts of my career. And luckily they're mostly in my career, but I'm sure if I keep talking, I'll come up with something in my personal life too. Um, Having kids is not exactly the easiest thing to start doing, but anyways, we'll move from there. So I think the first one was when I shifted my career focus from finance into the business.
Right.
And I studied finance, international business. I was in banking for 4 years, and then I had always wanted to work in a multinational company. And for starters, I am one of those people who believe that you put your intentions and your desires out there
Yes.
for people,
Yeah.
and the universe. And so I had always said, I would love to work for a global multinational company. Like, how cool would that be?
Yeah.
And I had an opportunity, to join American Express after a few years in banking, as I said, and joined in finance, and stayed in a finance career, track for a
Right.
while. In fact, half of my career at Amex was in finance, and then the latter half was business. And I was the finance officer for a business in American Express in Latin America that had been sort of floundering. I'm going to call it
Mhm.
floundering.
Right.
It was a very unique, different business, but it was floundering. And as the chief finance person, I understood the business super well. But I'm behind the numbers and the spreadsheets and all of that stuff, right?
Right.
And then the opportunity comes where we have to hire a general manager for the business to lead the business.
Okay.
And it was a moment where I had half the people saying to me, it's got to be you, the business. Half the people saying you're absolutely insane if you're going to take this role. It may be career suicide.
Okay.
Right? I've got that going. And then I've got my own self-doubt with, can I shift from finance into a general manager role, managing a functional area to managing a big group of people? I mean, we're talking hundreds of employees in a
Yes.
region, exposes you to a different level. Um, has you take on from, again, a finance role into a regional executive team, probably 15, 20 years older than you,
Wow.
which, from an age perspective, what comes with that is a lot of experience and wisdom, where I didn't have that. I
Yes.
understood the business, but I didn't have the wisdom. So I had to work through that. And finally, because I'm one of those people who do not let fear
Yeah.
dictate actions, right?
Yes.
It's just, I refuse to do that in my life. So that's what happens when you're a child of exiles, right? Like I compare everything to my parents' experience.
Yes.
I say,
Yes.
oh my God, if they did what they did with 3 children coming to a foreign country, come
Right.
on, you can't
Right.
move finance to business. You're not
Exactly.
gonna
What are
be,
your
right?
problems?
What are my problems? Like, what am I going to fear? So, look, I took that on, because I reflected with the following. Some people believe I can do this. Number
Yes.
one, right? I must have demonstrated the capability to do this.
Right.
And so you start sort of anchoring on the belief around what you do well and what you're uniquely qualified to do. And here's what I knew that I could do. I knew the business really well, like in and out. I also knew that I had a very, very natural ability to connect with people and across
Yes.
the organization and bring people along, and create sort of the vision and then get everybody excited for the vision and really corral energy around what had to get done, although it felt daunting or difficult or anything of that nature.
Right.
And so, I said, and this is a great learning experience.
Yeah.
And what a great opportunity to step into individuals around the table who are that much more experienced. I could learn from, they can learn from me, and we go from there. And then, what I always say, what's the worst that can happen?
Exactly. Exactly.
So, I hope that gives you a view. To me, that was such an important moment because it changed the trajectory of my career.
Absolutely.
Completely.
Absolutely. There's so much that I love
Completely.
about that story. Um, the first thing that I think about is um, that we have to in life, if we allow ourselves to, really allow others to help breathe the belief in ourselves,
100%.
right? Because we can talk ourselves out of every little,
Absolutely.
motivation, inspiration, idea. But if we don't have that self-belief, then we're never going to do it. We're never going to take off. We're never going to leap, you know? And part of the journey of leadership, I think you'll agree, is that I have to both listen to my inner wisdom, that spark that's igniting within me. And I also have to go to others and say, hey,
100%.
what about this? Do you agree? Do you agree that I could do
Absolutely.
this? Right. And it's the combination of both that could really be, the fire starter for us. I remember going through one of the, executive women leadership programs that FIU had. And one of the exercises was, called reflective best self. And you had to go to a handful of people, personal and professional, and tell them, please share with me a time
Mm-hmm.
when you believed. You probably did the same exercise. Share with me a time when you saw me at my best. Paint the picture for me, right? What was I doing? What was I saying? What am I excellent at naturally? And blah, 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 blah. And when you read all of those individual stories, all of a sudden you're like, wow, I
Wow.
need
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
bring that back into my life, right?
Yeah.
Because we get comfortable, and with all of the difficulties of the roles that we accept, we begin to forget maybe, what we're made of and what we're capable of. And with that in mind, Francis, well, and let me just plug in the astrology.
Yeah.
Everybody always expects me to in this podcast. And
I love it.
I truly believe that we pick our parents, we pick our family members. And yes, like there's no doubt in my mind, you pick to be the daughter of parents, exiles, because of their strength, because of their resiliency. And when I look at your astrology, both from a traditional astrology perspective, but also from a 5 element perspective, you were born from that cloth. Like you are here to be a leader. First of all, in traditional astrology, you're an Aries. It's like, I'm never gonna let fear get in the way. It's like, show me the stairs. I'm gonna climb up those stairs,
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
but in feng shui astrology or 5 element astrology, which is a very simple, beautiful, elegant astrology, you have, 3 archetypes, right? We all have 3 archetypes. For you, they are the transformer. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, you're here to build things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So of
Mm-hmm.
course, naturally, you have to accept roles that are going to help you to build
Yes. Yes.
and transform, right? And
Yes.
and with that archetype comes resiliency. It's like we call it the immovable mountain.
Mm-hmm.
When you believe in yourself or when you believe in someone else or when you believe in something, it's like, I'm not moving. It's happening.
Right. Right.
The second archetype that you have, which is more of an internal archetype, it's the artist, it's the dreamer, right?
Mm.
So you were sharing with me
Yes.
before this call that you're an artist. You got back into painting just a month ago. Not
Yep.
only do you have that in your DNA, like you are here to create, to be creative, an
Mm-hmm.
ideator. But it just so happens that this year for you, the energy of this year for you is the dream year. It's for you to allow yourself to be the artist the creative, the dreamer. It's not necessarily about starting something new or getting
Mhm.
busy or getting to work. It's about what can I build? What can I create that's,
Oh my goodness.
allows me to dream. And then the third one, which really kind of matches your Aries energy, is the archetype of the leader and the winner. It's like you're here to lead, you're here
Yes.
to win, no matter what you do. And so of course, um, accepting these massive challenges, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
know everyone out there who has either worked in the corporate world or has strive to sit in a position like the one that you did and the ones following.
Yep.
It's a big task, right?
Yep.
It
Yep.
is not easy. You're dealing with people and with lots of people, with multiple locations, with constant change,
Yes.
right? And it's just it takes a lot of all of these things, all of these archetypes that you have naturally. um but I want to hop back to this experience. And what did you learn when you jumped into it, and how did you this is something that comes across in a lot of my coaching
Yep.
with leaders and with executives who are in multinational companies or global companies. And it's you know I'm afraid. I'm younger than most of the people that are going to be reporting to
Mhm.
me. And
Mhm.
how do I own it? How do I
Mhm.
do it with grace, with compassion, but
Yep.
also getting it done? How did that work for you?
Yeah. By the way, I love this diagnostic around the archetypes. I have to tell you, I think had I known this, now a lot has just sort of fallen into place. Let me just say, it really has, in particular, the first one, which is transformation, because
Yeah,
I am that person that
you
runs
are.
towards change and
Yes.
opportunities for impact, which is what
Yeah.
I coach leaders on, especially obviously in business, which is sort of that's what you're going for, right? You're
Yeah.
going for, of course, hard work delivering results, but it's impact and transformative impact, whether it's to people, business, or otherwise. So that makes sense to me. And I love, we're going to talk more about the dreamer and the learner and the winner, because I really love that. And I
Yeah.
think it's to my optimistic sort of mindset, which
Yeah.
is usually just overtaking the doubts and everything else. I try to shut that down, or at least quiet it down,
Right.
with more of the optimistic and what if, and this is meant to create an opportunity or just a challenge that you're going to learn from. But so let me pivot to that other role again. And look, I always believed, and I was super super young when I took that on. I was in my early 30s, and so like we said, like that doubt that creeps in one way, shape, or form. Is it
Right.
because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm Hispanic? Is it because I'm too young? Is it tall,
Yeah.
short? I don't know. It's all sorts of things start creeping in. And like I said, for me, I said to myself, no one understands this business better than I do, like literally.
Yeah.
And and you and I talked about this in the past, this notion that we do need to understand ourselves deeply and
Yeah.
understand our strengths deeply, because those are the assets that are going to get us, number one, confidence, which I
Yeah.
think is, I can talk about confidence for 30 years, and somebody reads my resume and says, oh my God, you must be so confident. At every twist and turn, there's a new challenge.
Right.
There's a level of expectation of performance. There is yet, one more sort of doubt to overcome.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I've managed. So when you take this approach of really understanding yourself and giving yourself credit for what you do bring to the table, what are your unique strengths,
Yeah.
um like no one else can. Like I said, besides understanding the business and understanding finance, I love people and working
Yeah.
with people. So
Yes.
my number one thing was, I've got to bring the best people to the table. I've
Mm.
never been shy or felt threatened by people who are smarter, better at all. Like for
Yeah.
me, it's about understanding what I have in front of me and
Yes.
what are the best people, skills, talent, personalities, etc., that coming together really create something incredibly special.
Yeah.
And so my mindset early, now I worked for an organization, and I give Amex full credit for this, because it was an organization that invested in leadership development before it was a thing. And
Yeah.
it was many moons ago, and I
Yeah.
benefit from that. So really investing in yourself, but also in people,
Yeah.
and bringing the best people around you and saying, what don't I have? It's okay.
Right.
Let the ego, you're not the know-it-all. You
Mm.
don't have it all, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That self, sort of, I think that self-assessment, the real authentic self-assessment, allows you and opens you up to the possibilities of bringing other people who just bring the ingredients that you need. And you're
Yeah.
still leading, right? I mean, your role as a leader is to paint the picture of where we're going, assemble the great team to make it happen, motivate, coach, and develop throughout, and then bring other
Absolutely.
people across the organization. And Monique, that is what I did.
Yeah.
What I tried to do early on is bring the team that would help me think through the problems, develop a strategy, and then ultimately just head down, focus, and get it done.
Yeah.
And stay very optimistic, throughout. And what I mean by that is have a good time.
Yeah. Says the Aries. Yeah, yeah. I know fire signs real well, and they love to have fun. But I mean, you're speaking to so many things, right? And part of that, because that's what I do. I'm in the self-development, assessment
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
That's why I'm very passionate about astrology and some of these other more non-traditional assessments, if you will. For me, they're so right on about who we are and what we're here to do, what our strengths are, right? And you and I both talk strengths language, Gallup strengths, and I
Yep.
love the tool, use it for many of my clients. But, everything you just mentioned, going back to this transformer, I mean, you couldn't have defined it more better. Why? Transformer, the archetype is actually the element of earth. Earth is Mother Earth. She's here to care. She's here to see the best in everybody. She's here to bring the people together, to highlight people's natural gifts. And that's always been so natural for you, only because I've experienced you obviously working with your team, right?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
see
Yes.
how you bring that beautiful combination of let's have fun and let's honor what each of us do uniquely well, right? And I think a lot of leaders do get into trouble in many ways. Either they're not showing up as their best, or they're putting up invisible walls between people because they're focused so much on what I should be, who I should
Yes.
be, but
Yes.
not
Yes.
really showing up authentically as who you
Yes.
are. And what happens when you know yourself so well, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you could sit there with a group of people and say, hey, this is who I am.
Is
This
it?
is what I'm great at. This is what you're going to love about me. And then
Yeah.
there's this over here
Yes, exactly.
that I'm not so great at, but that's why I'm bringing you guys to the table, right? So
Absolutely.
let's
Absolutely.
just throw it all out there and be
Yep.
honest with
Yep.
each other and throw those egos out the door.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this brings me to think about something that I also often talk to women about in particular, and maybe in particular even moms, single moms or their husbands
Yes.
and families, is it's important to ask for help when you need
Yeah.
it. There is no need to try to become superwoman, and the do it all, have all the answers, keep everyone, doing what they need to do, what you think they need to do, and just keeping it all, moving on your own. In fact, there is great danger in that.
Yeah.
I can talk about in health from a health perspective, obviously, and we've talked a big topic now, of course, more and more. But it really does boil down to being able to, be okay with not being able to, you doing it all,
Right.
but rather asking for that help. So whether it's on your team and being able to, admit those areas that you do need help,
Yeah.
whether it's technical knowledge or it's your style. Like, I am not a patient person. And I tell anybody who works with me, like, immediately, it's like, this is one of the things I've always worked on, sort of. I've learned just to accept it. And I just say, look, I'm not that patient. And so I'd like to see results fairly quickly. It's also where I need other people to say, remember, it's not about the results we just get today and tomorrow. We've got to play it for the long run. So I
Yeah.
tell people this up front, so like they know, and so they can, as they hear me talking or leading or doing, they can say, you're doing it now. Like, you're actually very focused on the right now, and we need to keep an eye on the future, et cetera. And so that humility that comes with, I think successful leadership is very important.
Yeah.
And whether it's innate or not, I think, you can learn, you can teach yourself
Yes.
humility. And I think it's a very important trait of a leader, in order to draw these type of, authentic, what I just call, authentic relationships, and people
Yeah.
wanting to help you.
Yeah. It's interesting because in the work that I do, obviously I meet people who are not good with people. They're
Yes.
leaders where that's their downfall,
Yeah.
and yet to be a leader in any organization, it's something that has to be there in some way. It has to be cultivated, and
Yes.
what I have found, which the research also kind of shows it's true, it's like you gotta work within your strengths the majority of the time. If you can be in your strengths and doing what you're great at, because you're going to keep getting better and better at it, like 80-90% of the time, then
Yeah.
10% of the time you're really managing those weaknesses. And but in a leadership role, you can't get away with not developing relationships or trying to fill that gap in some
Yes.
way. And
Yes.
and one of the ways to do it is by bringing a partner with you who is great with the people,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and but it starts
Absolutely.
with really just understanding yourself, to your point,
Yes. Yes.
um now I want to stick with the women, right, for a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
and what your experience is. I know, just being a woman, number one, being a woman who prioritizes family and life outside of work,
Yes.
and yet being in such a time consuming, I would imagine 24 hours of the day type of job, not only with American Express, but later on with MasterCard,
Yeah.
um, in a global role. How did you manage that as a woman? And how did you support and mentor the women in your team, who I'm sure also dealt with those issues of balance and overwhelm and prioritization, and still making it up the ladder, promotion?
Yeah. 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 Well, you used one of the words, which is prioritization, which I think is absolutely critical. On this one, I always say, I'll tell my story. I don't know, to what extent there's like a, silver bullet, as they say,
Mm-hmm.
but I think some of us get lucky as well. Our circumstances, the people in our lives, facilitate, some of these really tough choices that we make. And it so happens, if you will, that first, my husband is like number one cheerleader. And so that is of great help, because
Yes.
it is not a relationship where there's a competition in
Yeah.
terms of who gets further, who goes further, and why, if we have to, if you will, make sacrifices of time, it's always you and not me. And
Right.
so it's really genuinely sort of this view that if we support one another, we all win. Like, the
Yes.
whole family wins, right? So that's super important. Now, that does not, let me be very clear, and certainly for me, did not give me sort of the pass in feeling not guilty,
Right.
especially when the kids were young, right? Because I mean, my career spanned 30 years, and
Yeah.
so our oldest son is now 28. And so there were pockets and moments of time that felt more challenging than others.
Sure.
And so you manage your life differently with a different support system around you to figure it out. And as you said, Monique, I've always wanted to be part of the
Yeah.
kid's life. I know that if I had to go back now and sort of, I don't know, if I had to measure, what percent of the time I was there when I was supposed to be there, I'm sure I'm below average. I have a sense. Then the mom who for whatever reason, didn't have the type of career that I have had, traveling, most of the time. And we're there all the time physically. But, I like to believe, and I talk to my kids about this all the guilt comes up even now. It's like,
Sure.
are you guys okay? Like, were you okay? Like, if you look back, and so they remind me, it's like, Mom, we love the fact that you had a career. And by the way, that is their, I wouldn't say expectation, but certainly that's what they got used to.
Right.
And their respective, partners are similar. And they're women with really good heads on their shoulders and independent, which is key.
Listen, yeah,
Right?
that's
Right? I mean,
something they definitely learned from you.
that's
And
it. And so
yeah,
that, Monique, honestly, from the guilt, you sort of start translating over,
yeah,
going, okay, but within all that, there have had to have been positive elements in this. And so that's where I sort of think about that. You focus on the hardcore important things, your family values, for us, faith, family,
right,
those were just absolutely central. And that's what I was really sort of focused on, making
right.
sure that, when you look at the whole, the sum of the parts, it seems pretty good because I
Yeah,
have a family that's very supportive. I'm working my butt off, making, good living and helping my entire family have a better
yeah,
life. And so that sort of, helps, notwithstanding, again, I think there are different parts and points in time that become super challenging, and you have this guilt. And I remember sitting down very early in my career with someone in a very senior level, and they said, the guilt never goes away.
yeah,
Accept it. Accept it as something that, as a mom, you're probably more than often going to feel it, because you feel, even if it's not just things like baseball game or
right.
the show, it's in general. Am I, coaching and developing my kids
Yes,
in the
yes,
right way, right? Like
right.
you have, and that is the most important responsibility. I think any of us who make a choice of having a family, like, it's got to be your highest priority. It's like, what on
Right.
earth could possibly compare?
Yeah,
But again, I realize that, there are moments where you have to spend an inordinate amount of time outside of the day-to-day. So for me, it was a combination of, like, again, Eddie had my husband, for those listening, had a relatively flexible schedule. So
yeah,
we fit in, so, and like I said, I think we just felt like it's the both of us, it's not one or the other. And,
right.
and that's a big deal. That's
Yeah,
a big deal,
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And if it's someone out there who maybe is not married or doesn't have a spouse, it's who's going to create
whoever.
your support system, right?
Whoever, absolutely.
Right.
And I'll go back to, you've got to ask for the help when you need it. Like,
Yes.
and you have to set your boundaries as well. So this is what I wanted to go back to, because you said priorities.
Yeah.
And I think, look, I think in general, not to sound super trite, but the reality is that there are 24 hours in a day. You have to make choices every single day how you're going to use those 24 hours.
Right.
And you know what? Sometimes you're going to make choices that will not please everyone.
Yeah.
But you have to be in charge of your choices in your
Mm,
life.
yeah.
And I think that's incredibly important, in understanding, therefore, what's the implication of the choices I'm making is really important. Like, you've got to get into this consciously. So
Right.
if there are women out there right now who said, oh my goodness, well, listen, first of all, fast track, right? Like, after COVID, we have a very different work-life environment,
Yes.
which
Yes.
in some cases is a big benefit. In other cases, quite honestly, we can talk about that, it's not so much. I personally believe in socialization. I personally
Yes.
believe at the power of relationships in a physical format. Like,
Yeah.
so I'm a huge
You
proponent of
know
that.
what's interesting is that, just to interject here, that the new Gallup engagement numbers just came out,
Yeah,
and there, of course, disengagement is higher,
higher.
engagement is lower, but particularly those individuals who are not
Yes,
physically
yeah,
in the
I
office.
know.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think, I mean, it just goes back to the basis of humanity and the need to connect
Yes.
with one another to develop deep, rich, happy relationships. And
Yeah.
that is a real thing. And so I think, I think having to, set those boundaries and those choices and those priorities is, it is what it is. When your kids are small, it's probably a daily, like, hourly task. When your
Yeah.
kids are in middle school and high school and college, you're just going through a different phase. And I think you have to adapt. But I really believe it's clarity of your parameters and
Yeah.
your choices and your, I think this is where risk taking, I'll bring it back in here again. And I say, what's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody's
Yeah.
gonna fire you because you said, listen, I gotta go to my son's baseball game 2 times a week.
Right.
No, I gotta deliver I have to deliver what I'm responsible for. What do you care
Yeah.
if I, do it in 6 in the morning or at 6 at night?
Exactly.
But that takes confidence, Monique.
It
Not to be
does.
naive, right? And where you are in your career, some of the women or men listening are very early in their career. They
Yeah.
haven't built that reputation. They haven't built those relationships. When you get older in your career, you're like, listen, it is what it is. I've gained I've earned my reputation. You can count on me.
Right.
But I do think you work towards that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, listen, let's be real. The reason I got into leadership and training on leadership and researching leadership is because I had a whole heck of a lot of horrible, toxic leaders before I
Yeah.
actually found the one leader who opened my eyes to what leadership
Yeah.
really is.
Could be. Yeah.
And the reality is, I could say, I think here with confidence, is that you were a caring leader,
Yeah.
and probably willing to have those conversations with your team members who were struggling with boundaries, and maybe even asking permission to, is it okay if I work on this
Yeah.
after hours because I'd like to go see my son's baseball game, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, unfortunately, you don't have a leader that's willing to do that, and then that becomes a life choice for you,
Yeah.
right?
It is. It is.
And a right fit choice.
Yes.
But
So,
thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
I know that so many women are still struggling with those types of decisions, in looking to advance, in their
Yes.
career.
Yes. Yes.
I
Yes.
want to go now to another pivotal life moment for you, which I recall, you going through, um, and because there's so many women and men who listen to this, and they're in that, I want to pivot. I want to pivot. I want to go from
Yes.
corporate to entrepreneurship. And you did that, when
Yes. Yes.
you had a moment where you
Uh,
started your own business, and then you're like, I'm not sure that I want to do this. So how was that story for you?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that one was that was tough. It
Yeah.
was tough at one level, and then it ends up being one of my most fondest memories, which is incredible. And so this is, just for context setting, 2008, 2009 financial crisis. The world
Yes.
is literally going to hell in a handbasket, right?
Wow.
It's like it's just a terrible period. And if you're in financial services, and I was still at Amex at that time,
Yeah.
your business just went, down the tubes. And so at that particular time in my career, I was leading a global business, and I was being asked to consider relocation to New York. And we just talked about what comes first, faith, family.
Yeah.
And we're deeply rooted in Miami with our family, and it was just not the right choice for us. And it literally, and I'll never forget this, like visually, we were sitting around our island in the kitchen, Eddie and I, and it took us maybe 35 seconds to say, not relocating, not the right time, not the right decision for us. And again, sort of thinking through, what on earth does that mean? I mean, I spent 17 years in a big company, and all of a sudden, oh my God, in this moment of great uncertainty, not knowing, quite honestly, at the beginning of that, how long that was going to last and the implications of that. Now, I got lucky because I worked for the company a long time. So, I transitioned for a bit, and then, had a sort of financial, just net is what I'll call it, as part of, which is, again, I consider myself fortunate. But I also remind people, that's why you make choices like working for big companies, the good
Right.
and the bad, and the ugly of working for big companies. The good is they usually, do these things for you, right? You give them their loyalty, you deliver results, you're going to, probably gain the
Do really
benefit
well. Yeah.
when that's, that's the benefit. So, I said, I remember thinking at that time, I swear, it's a little bit of this optimistic, to some level, naive mentality that I had at the moment. And I said, oh, this could be the funnest adventure ever. 17, why not try something different? And I have a good friend of mine who asked me to read a couple of books. One was The Second Half. It's called The Second Half. And it is literally about the second half of your career, if you look at
Right.
the midpoint. And then the other one was My Working Identity, which talks to people who have had a long-standing career in a similar company, and your identity becomes one in the same with that company, right? It's
Yes.
like, hi, I'm Frances Hondal, and I'm from American Express. Like, that's who I was.
Right.
And the books and the conversations at that time sort of, really gave me, I'm not going to say confidence, but motivation to look at this period of time as an adventure.
Yeah.
And just like an opportunity to recreate, to create,
Yeah.
to try something new, try and fail. Like, again, what is the worst that can happen? I'm sure if I had to absolutely work, I could find a job and I would be willing to do whatever it took if it got to that point, right?
Right.
But I said, but if I'm here, boy, I'm going to explore. And I did, Monique. So I'm a finance person, so you have to understand, and I'm usually a pretty good planner. So I do plan. So the first thing I did was I developed a list of people I needed to meet in the community, because they were the right people that would help me make connections and let me learn what's out there. I was so willing to learn and try new things, as I said. And and then I started a company. Like, I had to start a consulting company,
Right.
had some work on the side. And then after that cycle, which was, learning to be an entrepreneur, first, my father was an entrepreneur. And I always say this, it's like I garnered a completely, like, elevated level of respect for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. So what you do and what others do, without the big corporate infrastructure behind you, is admirable. Like, it
Yeah.
is hard work. And
Yeah.
I loved experiencing that hard work. And then I realized it is just not for me.
Yeah.
It's and not the hard work piece, because I work plenty, obviously, but it's just I remember thinking this as I explored opportunities. It's like, who am I? I go back to the conversation we just
Yeah.
had. It was actually during that period that I learned about Strengths Finders
Yeah.
2.0. And I was reading it on the beach one day. I'll never forget, because it was such an aha moment for me. And I said, see, this is it.
Right.
You love big challenges. And now,
Yes.
with my archetype as a transformer, it's exactly the type of challenge I love. And I remember
Yes.
saying, I need a transformative role. I
Yeah.
need to be able to come in and offer help using my experience, my energy, whatever, my skills,
Yeah.
and make something big happen. And I love big audiences. This was my other thing, because I love big teams.
Yes.
And so I went, 1 + 1 is 2, 2 equals corporate. I have to go back to corporate.
Yes. What a
But
what
I
a
will
fun
tell you,
journey.
I didn't make a lot of money. But I learned and I connected with so many amazing people in the community that, to me, when I look back at that time, the richness of the experience was exactly this. Everything that I learned about myself, it was just such a great time of self-reflection.
Yeah.
And in fact, it kicked off. I'm not going to say like discipline, like I do it constantly, but I pretty much do it often.
Right.
Is this sort of self-assessment, and how am I doing? Am I moving towards my purpose? Am I moving towards my passion? Am I making an impact? And it was that moment between the two big corporate roles
Right.
that I allowed myself to reflect and to be open to ideas, and a ton of people around me giving me different ideas, and me pretty much being open to try a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
said, it's not going to work.
Right. And
This
those
is
moments
my,
are very important, from a spiritual perspective, I believe that it's those I'm going to call them downturns, because the economy, went
yes,
down, and
yes,
all of a sudden you're faced with a challenge that you haven't had. And to your point, this is who I've been. Who am I without this?
right.
And what does that say about
What does that
me?
say? Yep.
What does that say about me? And we need that time for reflection, no matter what, right? Even when things are going really great, we still have to pause and reflect because again, it can change at any moment. And I know that you
Absolutely.
experience quite a bit of change at MasterCard as
Absolutely.
well. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And so, when you said pivotal, another pivotal moment or a moment of, the fierce and flowing and,
Yeah.
things may not have been flowing as fiercely, or something like that. When I was considering moving back into corporate, like I said, I met a lot of people and people were so generous. I remember that time, by the way. It's just so devastating. And, especially people in my circle and financial services. I mean, it was a hard, hard, hard time. And yet the generosity flowed. And it was just so unbelievable to experience people helping other people, whether it was in a tangible, real way with a job or just the time. Let
Yeah.
me tell you my story. Let me tell you where I'm at. And it was just amazing. So in that, I was introduced to a couple of corporate opportunities where I landed at MasterCard. And I will tell you, Monique, what I went through to take on that job at MasterCard was believable. And so here I was being offered a role as a very senior leader in a very large and growing company, which is a huge industry. And I was reporting into someone who reported into the CEO, right? So it was very short, very
Yeah.
small organization in terms of levels. And of course the doubt starts
Yeah.
creeping in again, right? It's like, okay, I know I have great experience in payments, but Amex is different than MasterCard. And, I was in Latin America, I wasn't in the US, I wasn't in a
Right.
global role. I mean, I was in a global role at the end, but just those doubts,
Yeah.
that imposter syndrome that we
Mm-hmm.
know it really does exist. We hate talking about it sometimes, but it
Yeah.
is really there. And I remember doing something that you talked about, which I often do, and I do this pretty, again, with a fair amount of discipline, which is I call in my board of directors,
Yeah.
right? Like people who I trust dearly, and who I know are people who care about me
Yes.
and who know me and who are willing to give me the skinny on things, right? It's like, listen, as you said, how I operate. So in the bestest of moments, who am I?
Right.
Where do you see me? How do you see me that I may not be seeing myself in
Yeah.
this situation? And I remember it was back and forth and back, and different opportunities and very different opportunities. And the only reason that I wouldn't have taken on this role was because of fear again. And I said,
Yeah.
oh, and here I go again. Hell no, right? I was like,
Yes.
oh my goodness, of course not. Because, and again, I found myself reflecting on the things that I did so well in the 17 previous years,
Right.
which is build teams, obviously deliver results. I understood the fundamentals of business. And I was a very creative person, as you
Yeah.
said. And the company, when I stepped into it, was looking for transformation of sorts. And I thought, this is it. Like, this
Yeah.
is it for me, because I don't want to go into a position where it's just same old. I
Yeah.
want to make a position where I can make an impact
Yeah. Mold
and
things.
mold things and change things and influence things. And I stepped into that role again, having those doubts, and every moment that I would have the doubts, I would, and the days would go, and the evidence was there where this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm
Yes.
supposed to be here. And I will tell you, in my, I was with MasterCard 12 years, and we'll talk about pivots and, moving from corporate now to the boards. But
Yeah.
there was a moment in my, halfway in my career at MasterCard where I think a lot of people talk about fears. I think a lot of people may have maybe even left the company.
Yeah.
And it was a situation that I talk about, often, which is when I took on a global role. I had to present to the board of directors of the company. And I'll get to the point and say it was a colossal failure. It
Mm.
was not the best of the best, right? I went in not understanding true who was there, who the audience was. I knew who their bios were, right? I knew
Right.
that. I didn't know them.
Gotcha.
And I didn't understand what would be potentially top of mind for them,
Right.
right? I was one challenge, never to be done again on any audience, which is why I always ask, and I asked you, who would be
Yes.
your audience? Because I
Yeah.
think it's important to understand who I'm talking to so I can
Yeah.
put things in some level of perspective and context.
Yes.
That's one. But the second thing was I knew my material so well, I just knew it too well and didn't
Mm,
relax.
right.
Wasn't me. I didn't have this conversation. It was
Right.
just over preparation that I was just so uptight, if you will,
Yeah.
that I didn't allow myself to just demonstrate the knowledge, the deep understanding I knew of the business, the strategy and the direction that we were taking, et cetera, et cetera. And it was an awful experience.
Mm,
And I remember leaving that experience and calling a good friend and colleague and saying, holy shit, I think I finally learned what failure is like. Because
wow.
up until that point,
Yeah.
which is a long time, like over 20 years, I had just been doing, and, yes, of course, you get feedback here and there throughout your career. My goodness, I
Right.
hope so. And, how to improve, et cetera, but nothing like this.
Yeah.
And it was so impactful to me. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that was yep, that's what failure it feels like.
Mm,
And I gotta get out of that. I gotta jump back on, and just decided I'm not even gonna look back. It
right.
was shitty. Uh I learned from it, and from that experience I learned a ton, more than we'll have time to talk about. But you know I remember a specific conversation with a very senior leader that said to me a few days later, maybe a few weeks later, said, and how are you doing? With this very empathetic voice, as if I was just coming out of some major illness. And
A,
I
a little birdie on the sidewalk who's wishing
Yes.
he couldn't
It's like,
fly.
"My God, are you okay?" With this sympathy. And I said, "Oh my," and it was at that moment, I even felt worse, I think, because I said, "Oh my goodness, this is worse than I even,"
Right.
and I said to this person, "Look, it is what it is. It happened. My job is to move, and my job is to prove that that was a moment."
Right.
And
A
it
moment
doesn't
in time.
define a
Yeah.
moment in time. It does not define who I
Yes.
am for this company. It doesn't define who I am as an individual. I let the worst of me, and even
Right.
including the lack of confidence take over at that moment. And my job is to regain that confidence.
Yes. Yes.
And look, it was not easy. Like I said, it was a moment of even, suck it up, buttercup,
Right. Right.
move on.
I consider that a fierce moment. It's like, am I going to let myself down? Am I going to put myself in a
Exactly.
corner and believe that this is going to define the rest of my career and the rest of my
Exactly.
life and overshadow all of the incredible things
All
that
the
I
other
have
things.
done? Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
And as a result, like, I'm very results driven.
Yeah.
And that was my mindset. My mindset was nothing I think helps people forget than just the job and
Yes.
delivering and over delivering and doing all the right things. And fast forward a few years later, I had the opportunity again to present to the board. And this was right during COVID, which was super challenging. And the close of that conversation with the chairman of the board, who was still the same chairman of the board, he said, wow, Francis, this business has come such a long way from Sydney, because it was in Sydney, Australia,
Wow.
where we had the board meeting. Wow, this is just what a turnaround story.
Amazing. Amazing.
So, right. And so it's like, they okay. Phew, I made it.
Yeah, and I
And
think
yeah, and it's good. And let's be honest, like, I was looking for that moment, right? Because that was going to be a pretty, like, a scar that I wanted the scar to heal. I wanted it
yeah,
to, I wanted to put a little Moderna on it,
yeah,
and not see it. And I felt good. I felt, I did the right things, stayed focused on doing what I knew was the right thing to do for the company. And
right.
advice I give people quite a bit there's a couple of things about leadership that I think are important.
Mm-hmm.
One is when you lead people, it is not about your personal success.
Right.
It is about helping your team become the best versions of themselves and collectively do what you've been tasked to accomplish.
Right. Right.
And your job is to, like we said earlier, assemble a great team, motivate, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is absolutely, essential as a leader, is to be able to put yourself aside. The second thing I always think of in the same spirit is you got to think of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The big picture is the organization.
Yeah.
Frank Hondel's ego.
Right.
It's, you got to stay focused on what is it that I am here to do. The job
Yes.
that I have been given is to drive this business to this level in this time frame, et cetera. And that's what I did. And as
Yeah.
a consequence of that, you're doing your job,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's hard sometimes because, let's be honest, we all want to be quote unquote successful in
Sure.
the traditional definition and be seen successful. Well, success is not at every moment, every single experience, right? It's at the end game and how you've defined what you're trying to achieve. And,
Right.
a job is a small part of that, of your life. But
Absolutely.
that was a
And
big moment.
amazing on so many levels. I think it's a testament to you knowing what you wanted and being very clear on accepting that role, right? To your point, the corporate journey is not for everybody,
Yeah.
especially the way that you've done it, right?
Yeah.
Like it does require that it's not about me. I'm one person that needs to lead all these others in order to accomplish the task that's been given to me, but it requires a lot of sacrifice, a lot
Yes.
of definitely leadership
Yes.
acumen for
Yeah.
sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. For
And
sure.
so,
And, yep.
yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. The only last thing I was going to say, because I always say this, and I don't want to lose this, is in that journey of leadership, and we talked a little bit about humility, excuse me, I think is your ability to give constructive feedback and receive it, and actively ask for feedback. I
Yeah.
did commencement yesterday at FIU when, as I was just commenting to the students there, I said, along this journey, along your long career journey ahead of you, you really do want to build obviously deep relationships and expand your network. But within that, get prepared to really meet people who can support you with honest and constructive feedback. And
Yeah.
equally, it is your job to do the same. And for people who find themselves not receiving rich feedback that can help them develop or, again, manage their career, you have to ask for it.
Yeah, you do.
Sometimes we shy away from it because who the hell wants to, I tell people feedback is a gift. It's like a gift. Some gifts, you receive it and you're like, wow, this is
Yeah.
amazing. I absolutely love it. Other gifts you want to re-gift. Other
Yes.
gifts you want to return, right? And so that's feedback. Feedback often doesn't feel good, doesn't feel comfortable, or it feels less comfortable for the person giving it, but
Oh, it
oftentimes.
is. I
And
remember that
so,
was one of my lessons, growing up and beginning to manage people, lead people, put together
yes,
my own teams.
so
I
hard,
remember
so hard.
my boss telling me, listen, you're a kind person. You need to learn how to be tough.
Yeah,
And that's the one thing I avoided. I just
yeah,
avoided it. Like,
so
and
hard.
of course I got better. But we do need that feedback. And it's part of our own evolution of
Yes,
getting better as a
mhm,
person. That's what we're here
yes,
to do on this earth, right? Is
yes,
to
yes.
learn and grow. So I do want to, before we start wrapping up, I have like 3 questions I want to
Yeah,
ask,
yeah, sure.
um, uh, a big part of why I do this podcast and why it's addressed to, high achieving, primarily women who really want to make a difference in the world. They want to use their talents um and thrive and be successful, quote unquote. But along the way, there's also this desire to live at the same time, live a more sacred life, be able to find this rhythm that creates a flow and be able to sustain it. And I've noticed that it is a difficult ride for many people to find that flow. And it takes hard work and a lot of self-awareness and personal commitment to be able to find that flow. So one of the questions I have for you, Francis, is along this journey, I'm assuming that there are parts of the journey where you're like, I want to design my sacred life, and what was that journey like for you? What does that mean for you, to design a sacred life that gives you this feeling of I am in flow, right? Even though there's hard times, even though I'm working my butt off, I'm in my flow because I've realized what that means for me, right? What having a sacred life means for me.
Yeah. Look, I don't know if this is, I'll tell you what comes to my mind, Monique. I don't know, because I'm not sure I've thought about it in that
Yeah.
way. But I recently met Arthur Brooks, who is the author of Strength to Strength and a Harvard professor about happiness. Fantastic. I was at the World Happiness Summit. Something that I just did just because I had time to do it, and I did do it because I met Arthur Brooks.
Beautiful.
And then Arthur talks about 4 really important pillars to have or to focus on in order to achieve happiness, and happiness is not an end state,
Right.
and you're in constant pursuit of happiness, or
Yes.
as he called it, happiness.
Yes.
Which is funny, but I get it, actually, right? Because
I do think that that's the definition of flow, is moment to moment happiness, and
yes, right, moment to
the
moment flow.
swing.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So he talked about faith, family, friendships, and then work, right?
Okay.
And I think that's right. Like if I look back, I'm like, yeah, like I think that's true. Like first and foremost, everything for and I grew up. My family was very religious.
Right.
My parents, both my parents were devout Catholics, and so I grew up in that, in a very actively, Catholic environment. More than anything, to be honest with you, I think it landed in something that is as simple as just being someone who believes in my case, in Christ,
Yes.
and something
Right.
bigger,
Something,
right?
yes,
Something
bigger.
bigger.
Yeah.
And knowing that faith
Yeah.
is really going to be the crutch. Like
Yeah.
that is the crutch,
That's what's
and
going to hold you in
that's
those
going to hold you
times.
in
Yeah.
those really tough times. Okay.
Yeah.
Good times I live in gratitude
Yeah.
first and foremost every day. It's like, it's just habitual. Like this,
Yeah.
I have to say, I live in gratitude every single day. And then when those tough moments have come, have had the gift, truly the gift of having faith, which is
Yeah.
incredible
Yeah.
because it gives you hope.
It does. It does. Absolutely.
And without hope, I think life can be pretty damn miserable
It can.
and really difficult.
Yeah.
And in the most difficult of moments, and most of us in our adult life have faced some really hard moments.
Yeah.
Loss, obviously, is a big one. And the hope gives you this sort of, again, optimistic framing around there is something on the other side of this.
Right. Right.
So this is how I've led sort of my life, with foundational, with faith. And then we're a large family. My family is very large, and we really take the time to nurture the relationships in our family, which is really important. And again, is it perfect? Obviously not. I mean, this isn't Hallmark, but
I'm
right?
going to ask you to write a card for me soon.
But you know what I mean?
Yes.
And then friendships. I'm blessed. I have friendships, from high school and in some cases grade school, right? Like I have a very close-knit group of friends that are really deep relationships. And then as I've worked, I have looked for jobs and opportunities, roles
Yeah.
where I am truly fulfilling a passion
Yeah.
that I enjoy it. It doesn't feel like work. And along there, I'm helping other people.
Yeah.
I'm helping other people learn. I'm helping other people grow. And so as I think about even where I'm at now, pivoting from corporate now into boards,
Right.
I still have this passion of helping people.
Yes.
And so I think as the sum of all that, some way, somehow, some again, moments where you draw more on the faith, when you draw more
Yeah.
on your friends or your family or work, managing that sort of holistically, has I think allowed me, I was gonna say, an old CEO used to always say, on average and over time, um,
Yes.
because there's not perfect at every moment, obviously.
No. No.
Issues, mistakes are made and, bad things happen, sad moments, all those things. But all in all, I think that's what's helped me. It's like those four pillars sort of,
Yeah.
working
Working
in
together.
harmony.
Beautiful. Yeah. And also just always asking, what I'm hearing from you is always asking, am I doing something that lights me up? Am
Yeah,
I, and that's going to be a different
always.
answer for everybody, right? What lights you up,
Absolutely.
and what I think another, based on what you just shared, which I think is super powerful for everybody to be able to ask themselves, like, what are those pillars for me? Right.
Yes.
And be clear on them. And then as we journey through life, moment to moment, with that awareness, we're going to figure out where's the gap. Where's
Yep.
the gap today that I'm not filling enough? And that's
Yeah.
why I feel maybe a little empty. Maybe that's why I
Yeah.
feel like my life is not sacred, or I'm not happy enough.
Yes.
Or so it's this, so beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. Yes. Own
Um,
it. Own it. I
Own
always say,
it.
own it. Own it. Own your life. Get in the driver's
Beautiful. So as we wrap up, I've been asking everybody the same question, which,
seat.
has an astrological background in our foundation, in
Excuse
the
me.
sense that, from an astrology perspective, the world, which includes each of us individually, is going through what I want to call a revolution, like
Yes.
big change, where we're being really asked to be brave, to stand up for who we are and our
Yes.
values, and fight for what's right, and redefine who we are, recreate, transform our lives and who we are, right? And over the next 20 years, I feel like that's going to be a big calling for everybody in some
Indeed.
way. So I'm
Indeed.
calling it your personal revolution. So obviously you've made another pivot, which I'm just so thrilled for you. And I can imagine how exciting it is to be on boards and to give that kind of feedback and support, these organizations in a new way. And so over the next 20 years, Francis, right? And you don't have to look that far out, but do you have a sense of what your personal revolution will be? Like the next iteration of Francis?
Francis, I just had lunch today with someone and I called this bucket in my life Francis 2.0. It might be 3.0. I'm not sure. I think it is 3.0.
Mhm.
Monique, I don't have it all figured out. And except to say that, and this might sound very bold, but I really do believe this. I think in this next click,
Yeah.
I am meant to do great things.
Yeah.
And yes, I really believe this. And what that probably means is I am meant to continue to help people
Yes.
in their own, you know, plights,
Right.
whether it's career, whether it's family,
Yeah.
whatever it is. I, I I see myself as a vehicle to help people move forward.
I love it. It's like
Really.
the perfect combination of all your archetypes put together.
Seriously, I tell you, I have struggled with defining what that actually is yet.
Yeah.
But I remain very conscious of it. And so I know what I do when I impact people, because even when I think I don't impact people, like with a 3-minute commencement speech, and then we get text
Yeah.
messages, oh my God, I heard her motivational speak. I'm like, my God, I spoke for 3 minutes. Like I barely even said anything. But apparently I said enough for somebody
Yes.
something. And
Yes.
so for me, that's where I get my energy, knowing that I actually had a positive outcome on someone. Now,
Yes.
what I'm thinking about is, how do I sort of box that up, create something from that, right? Other than look
Yes.
for these opportunities. And again, thank you for just having this conversation, which
Yeah.
was so much fun.
Of course.
Other than spontaneous, organic,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well,
opportunities.
I'm going to give you some tips because you are in your dream year. And so this year really is about you giving yourself that space, like diving into you, into your mind, reading books, exploring, thinking, journaling, just
Doing that.
continuing to just work, like mix the
Yes,
pot, like if you're
yes,
cooking
yes.
and throwing in some ingredients and playing, like that's what this year is for you. And and I'll tell you, because
I
it's
love that.
elemental work, that it is associated with the element of water. And I happen to know that you love the water and love being
Yes,
on the
yes,
water.
yes,
And
yes.
the more you do that, the quicker the answers are going to come. So really use the element of water to support you. But I would say this is a great
I love
year to
that.
just explore, to learn, to even like take a course if you want to, if you know, it's all about expanding your mind and
Yes,
using your
yes,
creativity, right?
yes.
Another great resource for people in the dream year is morning pages. Have you heard of morning
No, I have
pages?
not.
Okay, so just Google it, you'll see it.
Morning
It's a
pages.
book,
I'm writing this
and
down.
gosh, the author's name is eluding me, but it's Julia something.
Okay.
Julia Cameron. And it is a morning habit and ritual where the first thing you do when you wake up, of course, if you need to, do your whatever you do in the morning, and then sit down with your cup of coffee, your cup of tea,
Yep.
and you get 2 sheets of paper like this, 8.5 by 11, and you write down is it 2 full pages? I think it's 2 full pages. It may be more. Now I can't remember. But anyways, the process is, it's free writing. It's
Yeah.
anything that comes out of
Make your mind.
your mind, and it doesn't have to make sense, but your mind is getting used to feeding you information through this process. And before you know it, you're getting ideas and guidance
Yeah.
on that thing that you're looking for, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, on that
Yeah.
next step. So a
Okay.
lot
That's
of people,
helpful.
yeah,
No, that's helpful. I am doing the 5-minute journal, or 3-minute journal,
yes,
5-minute journal, which I really have liked. So a friend of mine gave it to me for Christmas. And so I've been doing that. I would say pretty, I've been every couple of days I do it, but I love it because I love the idea of waking up and first, again, sort of identifying things that you're grateful for, which I like,
yes,
and how the day would look like a great day. And again, it just gets you in this mindset, such a
yes,
positive mindset. And then the reflection at the end of the day of what you learned, to this. And I really love that. And I am finding myself, like I said, I got together with, I found out about Arthur Brooks, and so now I
yes.
have his book. And so I have an accumulation of books to read. So it's funny that you said this, because this is actually exactly what I'm doing.
Well, and the art. And
And the
a lot of
art.
times
Yes, I'm
in
exploring art.
putting ourselves in these scenarios where we're just playing, playing with paint, playing with music, just walking on the beach.
Yes.
It's just incredible how we receive, right? If we have
Yes.
faith, we're going to
Yes.
receive what we need.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
that starts a new spark. So
Yes.
enjoy this year, because I can't wait for my next dream year.
Listen,
It's
I'm
like,
excited. I
woo!
mean, oh my God. I mean, I feel what a gift. I have a dream year ahead of me. And you know, water does bring me, and it has always, in fact, as a joke, my team used to always say, please do not go to the beach this weekend. Because I would come back with like these new revelations of ideas. And so,
I actually remember, I
right?
think it was Ellen telling me I don't want her to go because she's going to come back with all these new ideas. And then we're going to have more work.
And then we're gonna have more work. But I love the water, and it's the serenity,
Yeah, absolutely.
that brings
Absolutely.
free flow.
Free flow. Yeah, I have that archetype within. Actually, we share two of the same archetypes,
Yeah?
believe it or not.
Okay.
Yeah, in different positions, and the position it is in matters. But yeah, I resonate a lot with that energy, and the transformer energy, which again, there's a reason why I'm a coach and I'm in the
Yes,
self-development. You know, it's
yes,
all about finding the gold in everybody, right?
yes,
And
yes.
helping others to live good lives. So I
I
am
love
so grateful to you, my friend. Thank you for
Oh my
taking all
goodness,
this
thank
time.
you. Oh my gosh, of course. How much fun.
And this has
I've
been wonderful
discovered
and
I've
can't wait to
discovered
share
so
it.
much. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I've discovered so much, and I appreciate the time as well. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Enjoy this chat, everybody, and we will see you next week for another fierce conversation. Take care.